All right, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Hearing. I'm very honored to be joined today by Mike Valente, Dr. Mike Valente, Professor Emeritus of Clinical Otolaryngology at WashU here in St. Louis. So, Mike, awesome to have you on today. You approached the team here at This Week in Hearing saying you had some material that you wanted to cover, and you came very prepared. You have a full PowerPoint deck and some spreadsheets that we're going to go into. So I'll kick it over to you and let you sort of introduce the topic and just kind of delve into what you want to share today.
Thank you, Dave, for the invitation. It's always nice to talk about this particular topic because I was involved with this for 34 years, directing the adult audiology program at Washington University. And I think it's an area that is of critical, and it's always been critically important. And I think it's an area that becomes more important now because of what's occurring between the dialogue between using a bundled approach and unbundled approach. How do we handle things such as OTC, direct to consumer, and all these other issues? So what I would like to go through is to put a presentation, there are 50 slides, that very pragmatically shows how I addressed this issue in financially directing the program at Washington University to very accurately and easily calculate our cost per hour, convert that into a charge per hour, utilizing whether it be a bundled approach or an unbundled approach, how we explain the differences between a bundled and an unbundled approach, and how we use this for all things going forward. As an example, how do we use this, which will be in the next presentation, for remote fine-tuning? Or how do we use this, for example, to determine what we should charge utilizing an unbundled approach, dispensing OTC type devices in our clinic, as opposed to losing that patient to go outside the clinic to pursue the same technology. So it's kind of like how you should run a practice so that your practice is profitable, whether or not you're utilizing a bundled approach, an unbundled approach, and how does that also deal with what's going on, diminished returns on what you're getting for doing diagnostic audiology. So that's all involved in this presentation. So first, why should you listen to what it is I have to say? Because in my experience, I'm typically mostly usually talking about hearing aids. So what is Valente doing talking about profit and cost per hour and these kinds of things? Well, it's because this is what I did on a daily basis. I had no business experience prior to becoming the director, but I had to, over time, learn these things and develop tools to allow me to do this efficiently and accurately. And that's really the thrust of the presentation. How did I get to doing what I did so that I know at the end of the year, my income, my net income will exceed my charges, my expenses. So at the end of the year, I will be profitable. And as you can see, in the 34 years I directed audiology, we were profitable every year except for 2008, 2009. And I don't think anybody in that year was profitable because that's when the housing market went south. And then, of course, the pandemic in 2020, where everything shut down. So other than those 2 years, audiology was profitable. And it didn't happen by accident. It took a lot of work, and a lot of that was what I want to share with you today. And you might ask yourself, why is it essential to be profitable? And can you be profitable and practice a practice utilizing best practice? So in my opinion, there is no defense to take shortcuts clinically to achieve the profit at the expense of using best practice. Our clinic operation demonstrated that profit and best practice are compatible. You can do both and do both quite well. So here's an example of 1 year. In the clinic that I operated, we had 9 full-time audiologists, 4 full-time secretaries at 3 clinical sites. So for 1 year, and I have data on all these years, we generated in gross charges a little under $4 million. We had to have adjustments of a little over $600,000. Those are expenses that left us with gross charges of about we collected $3,229,000, and we had a collection rate of 83.5%, which means for every dollar that we generated, we collected almost 80%. Now, that in itself is quite astonishing if you look at the collection rate of virtually every healthcare profession in the United States, which typically is 50% or below. So how is it that we were able to collect 80 cents on every dollar as opposed to 50 cents on every dollar? And the answer is how we managed our hearing aid dispensing practice. And we'll get to that into a little bit later on. In that same year, we had $2,200 in direct expenses. We had $704,000 in expense allocations. So our total expenses were a little less than $3 million. So at the end of that year, and our year began January 1st and ended at the end of June, when all was said and done, our net profit was almost $320,000. And so in the years that I was there, sometimes it would be 500,000, sometimes it would be 200,000, sometimes 600,000. But in the 34 years, we always managed to bring in more than what we expended. We were always in the black. We were never in the red, except for those 2 years. And that did not happen by osmosis. That didn't happen just by itself. There's a lot of stuff that went into that. And that's some of the stuff that I want to share with you. And just one more side note, if you think making a profit in a private practice is difficult, making a profit in a medical school is even more difficult because of all the additional expenses that are added onto your budget that I have no control over. And I'll share that with you later on in the presentation. So here's some interesting questions the listener, the viewer might have, and I'm going to provide answers to all of these. Why would a practice offer bundled and unbundled models in a clinic? Why not one? Why not the other? Why two? And the answer is, and I'll get into greater detail later on, prior to the last 2 years, so for 32 years or more, we have utilized the bundled model like the rest of the country when we dispensed hearing aids. It's only the last 2 or 3 years that we converted and offered an unbundled approach and I'll share with you later on, as our answer to getting hearing aids over the online, OTC, big box, and all these other things I'll talk to you about in a little bit. So I have what we call a hybrid model. We offer to our patients a bundled approach, which means all-inclusive, or we offer an unbundled approach, which means pay as you go. And that means you have to know what you charge for each visit. So we create a menu of services that a patient can select from if they elect to do the unbundled approach. But how did the charges come for that? And well, this presentation gets into the nuts and bolts of all of that. If you offered a bundled and an unbundled approach, this is very important. If you had 100 patients, giving them the choice between the two models, how many would choose to go the bundled approach? That is, I don't want to be nickel and dime to death. I want to pay right up front and let's go. Or do you want to do a bundled approach? I want to enter the technology at a lower cost. And then later on, if I want your services for the other things you described, I'll come make an appointment and you'll charge me for that. So in offering those two models, what percent of our patients selected one versus the other? Now, obviously, for that to work, you have to develop good counseling tools to explain to the patient what are the differences between the two and what are the advantages and the disadvantages of each, and then throw it out there and let's see what they select. You might be surprised at the answer to that question. The third question you might ask, what percent of your patients elected to pursue the traditional hearing aid versus those who selected to pursue the less expensive OTC, PSP, DTC, direct-to-consumer type aids using an unbundled approach? In other words, if you offered your patient the OTC process within your practice at a reduced startup cost, what percent of the patients would still select the traditional more expensive model that you've been doing for 30 odd years versus the new, less expensive unbundled model? The answer to that you might find interesting. And the answer to these latter two questions that is presented patients is really the heart of how audiology has done a poor job, in my opinion, in differentiating the product versus purchasing a product with service. We have not been good at explaining what we do as part of the bundled product. So when a person hears this hearing aid is $600 online, whereas it's $3,000 in the clinic, why is it $3,000 versus $600? Why should I go with you at $3,000 as opposed to going online? Because they are taking your $3,000 as a product. They don't understand what they're getting online is a product, and what you're providing is a product and service. And I'll explain that to you later on. It's the same thing as purchasing a chicken in a store and cooking it yourself, or going to a restaurant and order the chicken. The former is inexpensive and the latter more expensive due to the added value of the service and convenience. We have not been good at explaining to patients, when you get your hearing aid from us, it's like being at a restaurant, as opposed to you just getting this hearing aid out of the box and you're on your own. And once you explain this in an intelligent fashion, you'll be surprised at the answer that you get to the two questions above. And I'll share that with you down the road. So why would you not shift completely to an unbundled model if you've had a bundled model for 30 odd years? Why would that not be a wise decision? And I toyed with that for many, many weeks, months. And in the end, we as a group, 9 audiologists, decided we're going to offer both.
Yeah.
And here's the reason. Dave, you had a question.
I just said, yeah, that makes sense. The hybrid approach.
Yeah, we have a hybrid. So here's the question. And I've tried to think about this in my own personal experience. My wife and I, Maureen and I, we love going out to eat. And God knows we have plenty of choices of eating in a wide variety of restaurants here in St. Louis. So what if we went to a restaurant and our experience was candlelight, quiet, we can converse. And then somewhere down the road, for whatever reason, that same restaurant now became noisy and we couldn't communicate. So the first experience, we're going to call it bundled. The second one is different. It's just not the same. My question to you would be here, would you likely go back to the second experience when you've experienced the first? I don't know about you, but we would not, because something changed that made it more unpleasant, different. Here's another example. In that restaurant, when we first went there, we got this lovely meal and it was $24.99. We went back and it was $25.99 and the portion decreased. And then we went back again and the price went up further and it decreased even more. My question to you would be, if the first one has been your initial experience and you were happy and now things have changed, are you likely to go back to that restaurant? Worse than that, would you be willing to tell the restaurant why you're not going back to them? Think of how many patients, when you change things, you don't even know they're not coming back anymore because you don't have a really good system to track your patients. Here's another example. Your first one, the waitress was on time. They were there to get your order. They were there to give you your bill. The second time, you're waiting like forever to get your bill. This happened to us this past weekend. We went to a restaurant. We must have waited 20 minutes to get our bill. What's the chances of Maureen and I going back to that restaurant? Not only that, the food that we got was what we didn't order. And we went to that restaurant many, many times. Are we likely to go back to there when there are so many other choices to go out to dinner? Probably not. So we decided to stay with the bundled approach. Number one, it was profitable. And number two, there was a large patient database that we had. That was their experience. And we did not want to force another experience upon them that they were not used to or did not want. So that's why we stayed with both and let the patient choose which way they wanted to go. So my answer to that first question, if you offered bundled and an unbundled model to 100 patients, and you explained the difference, how many of in our experience, how many of those patients would elect a bundled model or an unbundled model? Now, you might think 30%, 50%, 70%. It's actually almost 91%. 91% of our patients, when I was there, elected the bundled approach. Now, you might say, but think about this. By offering both, we kept 9% of those patients to stay within us as opposed to going someplace else. So by offering an array of choices, you make yourself more competitive. And not only that, you have to understand if you're offering a bundled approach or if you're offering an unbundled approach, and you have correctly calculated your cost per hour and your profit, you're going to make the same profit regardless of which one you do. And it's just offering the patient the choice. And in our experience, and I'll share with you some of those counseling tools, and if not, let me know and I'll get them to you. We explain what you get on a bundle, what you get on an unbundled, what are the advantages, what are the different. You tell us what you would like us to do. I just think it makes us more competitive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like the choice is a really good thing. And those 9% of people, that might be something that is appealing to a larger portion of people that maybe never sought you out in the first place because they only had that perception in their head that there's this one size fits all approach. So I think that you're sort of catering to the old world, if you will, but also bridging it and giving people optionality to choose on their own terms what they want.
It also may be related partially to the demographics of our patient database. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, and I'll show you later on, we dispense almost 75 hearing aids per month. So we have a large hearing aid practice over many, many years. Mm-hmm. And our experience has been with proper counseling, most of our patients ended up selecting traditional technology and not the OTC, direct to consumer. And we'll talk about that in the presentation to follow this one. Okay. Cool. So the bundled patients, they will come out and tell you, that's very nice that you offer this menu of services. But I've been with you for 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be. I don't want to be nickel and dime to death. I want to go with what we did in the past. And that's what we do. And these people these patients want to pay one charge for all service for the duration of the warranty. And we order hearing aids, what I'll share with you later on, a 1-year warranty, a 2-year warranty, a 3-year warranty. It doesn't make a difference. I'll show you how to price it regardless of how many years of warranties it might be. In other words, how we did it. Okay. So this is a big slide, and I want to go through it slowly. Thus, we offer bundled and our current patients and new patients about these services, utilizing a bundled approach, and they don't want to be nickel and dime to death. We also offer the unbundled approach to reduce the charge in order to be more competitive with the upcoming OTC, PCP, direct-to-consumer. And in our unbundled approach, we always incorporate REM, real year measures, and 2cc analysis. That is not negotiable. And I'll show you exactly later on in our next presentation how we priced this so that it would be competitive with what these patients would see online and what they might see in where they get it in OTC. The one thing we won't compromise, it just is incorporated into our charge, is real ear measures so that and I'll show you where we came to that, so that the target, the fit matches a prescriptive target with the right and the left ear, and also the 2cc, so that we know before we dispense the hearing aid, it is performing to manufacturer specifications. Those two things are not negotiable. They are provided, and that's part of our unbundled approach. And that will become clearer in the next presentation. And again, for those of you who are skeptical, Data clearly supports significantly better performance utilizing real measures to match a valid prescriptive target and 2cc measures to assure quality control. It's there. So we offer both the unbundled and the bundled approach to provide patients with a choice and counsel on the advantage and disadvantage of each, and let the patient decide, do they want this fork? Do they want that fork? And we can accommodate both, and both would end up in a profit at the end of the day. It's really about retention, because patients arrive to your clinic because he or she felt you were the best to help that person hear better. Why provide that person any reason to pursue, to go someplace else for that care? You've opened the door, they walk through the door. What can you do to address their concerns at what other price point they want to start? That's why we incorporated OTC type technology within our practice to overcome those questions. Your clinic should offer as many options as possible. So, how do you calculate cost per hour, convert that to charge per hour, and then charge per visit type? And we had hours set aside in 30-minute increments, and I'll explain that to you later on. And this one calculation, and I'll share with you how we did this, was used for both unbundled and bundled approaches. And I promise you, I'm going to go through this step by step how we did this. So this is what you're going to need to do this. First of all, you're going to have to know what is your P&L statement. That is, every business has a P&L statement. Some are simple, some are very complex. I'm going to share you our actual P&L, which is very complex. But what you want to get from that P&L are only two things. One, what are all of your direct and indirect expenses? And I'll share with you in a little bit what are direct and indirect expenses. And number two, what are those expenses of things that you have purchased to dispense that you'll make money off of? So it's two buckets. One bucket is all of your big expenses, and your second bucket of what did you buy that you dispensed. And I'll show you how to do that. The thing that you also need is how much time does your clinic actually spend seeing patients, making a fee ticket, generating income? And I'll share with you, that's not nearly as easy as you might think. Okay? Thank God, if I'm paid for 40 hours a week, I don't want to work seeing patients 40 hours. I have things to do. But those things that I do other than seeing patients is not generating any income. What percent of my time am I generating income that's billable? And what percent of my time am I not seeing patients that is not billable? So you have to find out for the 9 audiologists in my clinic, how much time was spent generating income. And I'll share with you that later on. Also, equally as important is when you're doing hearing aid dispensing, it's made up of many, many different components. There is the hearing aid evaluation. There is the hearing aid fitting. There is counseling. There's 2cc analysis. There's changing tubing. There is connecting Bluetooth. There's a variety of things that we do that require a different visit. Each one of those visits require a different amount of time. So how do you do a time analysis so that you can calculate what is the average amount of time that you spend doing all of these different visit types? And then you create a menu of services. And I'll share with you exactly what that is later on. And then the last thing you need is, how much money do you want to make? What's your profit? Do you want to make a 10% profit, a 20% profit, a 30% profit? Or forgetting about percent, I want to have a profit of $200,000 at the end of the year. I want $500,000 at the end of the year. So one is a percent that you add. The other one is how much money do you want at the end of the year that is greater than your expenses, your net profit? The Excel spreadsheet that I created does both. And I'll share with you that later on, how you enter this data and instantaneously it calculates everything. And then all you have to do is say, well, do I want 10%? Do I want 20%? And then also you'll see what happens if, well, I'm going to leave you suspense. I'm going to show you later on what you can do with this in terms of the games you can play with the finances of your department. Okay. So in the slides that follow, I'm going to show you step by step utilizing real world my data to demonstrate how I calculated cost per hour, how I converted that to charge per hour, utilizing either the bundled or the unbundled approach. That's what this presentation is really all about. It takes the mystery out of it, and how you can be better financial directors of a division. So here's a question for you. Is it essential for every single staff member to know this? We had 9 audiologists. Is it really important that all 9 audiologists know what I did? My answer is no. The director would be the most obvious choice. But it's important, however, for every staff to be aware of the importance of achieving a profit and minimize no-charge visits. Audiologists, in my experience, sometimes are as close to being social workers as you can be without having an MSW. I mean, they give away this, they give away that, they give away this. And every time you do that, it's taking away from your profit. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just simply saying you need to be aware of what the impact of that is on your paycheck, on your ability to buy new equipment, on your ability to add more staff, so on and so on and so on. The responsibility, in my opinion, should be the director of audiology of that program, or the business, whoever owns the business, not a business manager. The director obviously has to work closely with the business manager, but the financial operation of the clinic should be the responsibility of the director. How many times have I heard, how can I convince the business manager to purchase a Relay system? And when I had that, people ask me that question, I would say, what the hell are you doing having a business manager telling you how to operate your clinic? That should be your decision. And that decision is based upon, can you afford it? Do you have the profit to support that?
One question I want to ask here,
Sure.
kind of going off of that last slide, is, I'm really impressed that you're pretty much self-taught in this regard, but it seems like there's part of the problem here, if you will, is that the business manager probably has some sort of, MBA or business degree, something like that. They have an education in reading profit and, P&L statements, and they're very well versed in this world. Whereas the director, the audiologist, the business owner, whatever, might be like the social worker that you described. And so how would you, I think you're doing a great service of even kind of providing a granular overview here of how you would go about doing this. But I'll let you continue to proceed. But it seems to me that that's something that we can touch upon on this, is how you can sort of maybe teach yourself how to become equipped to understand things like your break-even rates and be able to do these kinds of cost analysis yourself.
Hopefully, that's a great question. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, the viewer will have a greater understanding of that. But I do want to go back to your excellent point. When I was hired to direct the program, 34 years ago by the chair at the time, John Frederickson, I had absolutely no business background. None. Zero. I worked for the VA, and the VA, you don't have to worry about these things. And I worked at a university, and the university, you don't have to worry about these things. I had absolutely no experience. It was through trial and error.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, in all honesty, having a lot of meetings with the business director, going through a P&L, because and I'll show you in a minute, when I saw my first P&L, I said, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And I had a lot of meetings with the business manager to learn all of these things. And so I learned a lot of things along the way, made a lot of errors, made corrections. But again, I didn't start out any different than anybody who's watching this presentation. I had zero business experience, and it was only through really delving into the P&L to understand what this was all about, recognizing that the things that were being charged to me were not my expenses, and I had to do better tracking of my expenses so I can go back to the business manager and say, why are we being charged for X, Y, and Z when we don't even do that?
Yeah.
So but it was really working closely with that person. But I have to tell you, as an example, in my operation, there were a lot of third-party payers who wanted to have hearing aid business as part of what their patients would get. And then I had good relations with the office that made those contracts, if you will. And it took a lot of meetings, a lot of talking for me to quickly understand going into third-party hearing aid dispensing programs is not financially to the benefit of audiology. Audiologists lose on many of these a lot of money. So I ended up in a place many, many years ago where we offered no third-party reimbursement. We carved out hearing aids, and we only accepted 2 that allowed balanced billing. But how did I know that? By getting into the meat, by getting into the guts of this whole thing. Yeah. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. But again, to answer your question, I'm not like anybody else listening to this who has no prior experience. It's due diligence, it's taking the time, and hopefully this presentation will allow people to make some shortcuts and get to where I am now and not having to go through the weeds to get there like I had to get. And that's really what I'm hoping that people get from this.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope. So why do you want to make a profit? Well, there's a thing called the security. There are programs, that have folded or positions eliminated because audiology wasn't profitable. There are audiologists who had to take a vacation or convert to part-time because the schedule wasn't sufficiently full. You have to build your own practice independent of physician referrals, and that takes time. You have to have income if you want to go to AAA. Or do you want to go to, we had one audiologist who wanted to develop a tinnitus program. We sent that person to Baltimore, to Hopkins. We had another person who wanted to learn electrophysiology, stacked ABRs. We had another person who wanted to learn misophonia. That took time away from billing so they can travel and learn how to do this. Well, we could do that because we were profitable. And we knew that we can afford so that person not to spend as much time in the clinic to do that, to buy the equipment, to do that. We also had a budget so that every audiologist had $1,200 to go to a national meeting because we could afford it. We were profitable. We had to have income to buy new equipment. Prior to me leaving, we replaced, I think it was 9 audiometers, brand new GSI that we could afford because we were profitable. So all of this leads to making important decisions, being somewhat in control, autonomous of your own environment because you're profitable. We could offer new programs or services. We could hire new staff. We could increase salary, could possibly offer a bonus. We could have staff take part in program development, research, teaching, meetings. All of these things are non-billable hours that we could afford to do because we were profitable. Audiologists should not be viewed as income generators or technicians. Audiologists are well-trained professionals who need to have the tools and the time to pursue and build his or her own specific passions. And that becomes possible if you're profitable. That was my function, so that those things that were wanted, we could have. Or I could say, geez, I wish we could, but we're not where we should be in terms of profit. So how do you calculate cost? Here's the meat. We're getting to the meat. Okay. So you have to calculate cost per hour, and I'm going to share with you the spreadsheet. You have to select a desired profit. Do you want a 10% profit, a 20% profit, a 30% profit, or do you want some goal as a dollar amount at the end of the year? That the spreadsheet will give you that. You have to complete a time analysis for all visit types. And this is kind of important. And I think you and I, Dave, we talked about this before. I don't know how many times, either in the classroom when I taught, hearing aids, or in the clinic when I was supervising, or at national or international meetings, I was just curious, and I knew the answer. I would ask the question, when I was talking about this topic, I would ask the question, how much time does it take you to change tubing? I mean, it's a common clinical procedure. If you asked 100 audiologists, almost 100 will say 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then I would say, really? And I say, well, how about the time before the patient came that you reviewed their chart in your electronic medical record? How about the time it took you to walk up to the front to get the patient, walk them back, sit them down, and do your salutatories? Hello, how are you? What's going on in your life? How long did it take you to listen to your patient on what the issue was? How long did it take you to actually change the tubing? How long did it take you to counsel the patient on what you did? How long did it take you to walk the patient back, reschedule that patient, and then back to your desk to write the report? It's not 10, 15 minutes. It's much more than that. So when you're talking about a visit, it's not only direct patient contact, it's everything that went on before, everything that went on during, and everything that went on after. And in my experience, if you calculate all that, even the most simple thing as changing tubing is a half hour. And our menu is designed along that. A hearing aid check, where you do a 2cc analysis, you clean the ear molds, you clean the hearing aid, you change the cerumen, the wax trap, you do a whole bunch of things. That's 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes more, sometimes it takes less, but on average, 30 minutes. An audiometric exam, 45 minutes. A hearing aid evaluation, 60 minutes. The actual fitting of the hearing aid, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending upon the technology and the comfort level of the audiology. An ABR, 60 minutes. Patient counsel, that varies depending upon what's being counseled. The point is, every single thing that you do in terms of a patient visit, you can time it on average, and I'll share that, and create a menu based upon cost per hour, and I'll share with you. So remember we said you have to know all of your direct and indirect costs. So what is that? It's in your P&L. But what is that? It's your salary. That's your biggest cost. It's your fringe benefits, disability insurance, unemployment liability, Social Security, retirement, education for your children or your spouse, health, vision, dental insurance. That is the thrust. That's your biggest cost. Professional meetings. We had $1,200 allocated for each staff member to attend a meeting. Your cost for IT, malpractice insurance, postage, web development, parking spaces. These are all expenses that we had to pay for in audiology. The amount of rent, loan, taxes, insurance per year, cost for your billing and collection service, cost for your scheduling, cost for your electronic medical record system, which we used Epic, cost for marketing, consumer seminars, brochures, TV slots in the waiting room. We were not allowed to advertise. Here's additional equipment, PCs, laptops, phones, voice machines, fax machines, wireless interface for hearing aids, or base software for electronic. I mean, you can just look at that list. Each one of these has a cost associated with it. None of this is free. And that goes into that P&L cost, your direct and indirect costs. We're not done. Here's even more expenses. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Utilities, janitor service, email addresses. We have email addresses. They're not free. We have to pay for it at the university. And we couldn't use Gmail or Yahoo. We had to use Wash US too. It's not free. You pay for it. Shredding service, special software, pens, paper, printers, fax, ink, eating area, refrigerator. I mean, you go on and on and on. It's a litany that, the typical audiologist doesn't think about, but we had to pay for hanging pictures on a wall. If we had, the janitorial come in and hang pictures on the wall, we had to pay for that. Nothing in the medical school was free. We calibrated the equipment, everything. So that's what this is. I mean, these are just expenses. So what are hearing aid expenses, Matt? That's the little one. The little one. Remember, the first one is that's the big one. Now this is the little one. Your hearing aids and your accessories, shipping, batteries, charges, microphones, dry-in stores, impression material. It just goes on and on and on. These expenses are now separated out from the previous expenses in our formula. Okay. Question is, where do you see that in your P&L? I'll share that with you. So hold on to your seats on this one. This is my P&L. This is what I got every single month. When I saw this the first time, I said, what the heck is this? So let me kind of walk you through it. Now, your P&L probably is much easier than this, but this is my P&L. This is what I use to operate my clinic. So what do we have here? This column is all of my expenses and income. All of this area right here, that's all of my income. This area here, surprise, 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 the bigger one, those are all my expenses. And at the bottom, this is my profit. So again, all of this is income. All of this is expense. And the bottom is how much did I make or how much did I lose? So let me kind of explain all of this. What's in terms of being important? The top line is for up to, in this particular case, this was June 2018. How much did Audiology generate? As you can see, we generated a little over $3.6 million. The first column was our office on the 11th floor of the Center for Advanced Medicine. The second column was our office on the third floor of the Center for Advanced Medicine. The next column was our audiology office at CID. The next column was our audiology suburb, West County. The next column was what did we pay for research? That's always a loser. Research is always a negative value. As you can see on the bottom, it actually was negative 56. It costs our budget a little over $56,000 to do research. And on the right is just the sum across for the four offices and the research. So when all of this was said and done, at the end of the year as a whole, we generated $3.6 million. You can see here, we had provision of adjustments. So that's $704,000. And if you look at our net income, it was a little over $3 million. So if you have your expenses at 3.6 and your income, the money you've received, is a little over 3, you do the math, that came out to an 84.2% collection ratio. That means for every dollar we generated, we collected 84 cents. Believe me, that is really high. And there's a reason for that. That did not happen by itself. There's a reason for that. If you look at most professional services in medical school, that number would probably be closer to 40 to 60%. Audiology is higher. Why? Because we have something that is self-pay known as hearing aids and hearing aid accessories. And that is what floats the boat known as profit. If we had no hearing aids, that would not have been profitable. So the question, how do you work all that? All of this down here is our expenses. If you look down, you'll see a line that says resale, and it says $663,000 and $315. That is that second bucket. How much did we spend on hearing aids as services for that year? So the top part is income. This other part here is the bucket for our costs for hearing aids. The bottom bucket is what were our total costs? $2,243,000. That was our expense, of which $663,000 was for our business related to hearing aids. Okay. The $376 is overhead, which is an expense. Okay. So our total business expenses was I can't see it down there, 8 million, something like that. And at the end of the year, we had a profit of $326,178. CAM had a profit of $30,000. CID had a profit of $42,000. West County had a profit of $260,000, and research had a loss of $56,000. That's to the left, taken from that bottom row. So why was West County more profitable than CAM? Well, West County generated more hearing aid business, less diagnostics. CAM generated a lot more diagnostics, less hearing aid. Research is always going to be a financial loss. But we could do the research because the other three clinics carried the load. So at the end of the year, we were profitable. Again, every year we were profitable because of the dispensing practice we had and the decisions that were made based upon cost per hour. So I'm not going to go with that, but don't worry about that one. Okay. So I created a spreadsheet, which I'm going to share with you in a few moments because it was so complex. I needed something that would just let me see the big picture rapidly rather than going through all these mental gymnastics. So I created the spreadsheet, and number one, it acted as a counterbalance to compare to the accuracy of the data I got on my P&L. And early on, I found out those differences were quite large. And as I had more and more meetings with the business manager, those differences became smaller because we identified those things that would be taken as an expense off of my budget that shouldn't have been on my budget. But I would not have known that if I didn't take the time to track these things. It's an excellent source to demonstrate the need for additional staff, equipment, space, or services, and it's much easier to receive approval when you're profitable. You can make sound business decisions based upon profit. Do you need more staff? Do you need less staff? Which I never did. How much should it be for annual pay increase? Should there be a bonus? And how much of a bonus? All of these things are generated by that P&L. You can make changes in the calculation based upon if there are changes, and that calculation will be easy, accurate, and consistent. You can make accurate projections for your profit and loss for the following year. Every year I had to submit a budget and predict my profit for the following year. It became very easy to do that because I had this spreadsheet. I used it for quarterly and annual reviews to the staff to provide an accurate reflection of the productivity across and within staff and sites. So we had, as I mentioned, a collection ratio greater than 80%. Why? Again, most places typically is 45, 60% or lower. Audiology was higher. So how did we achieve this? In our division, hearing aids were 100% reimbursable. There was no third-party reimbursement except for 2 third parties, and both of those agreed to balance billing. We generated about 75 hearing aids per month. We never accepted a contract from third-party reimbursers that did not include balance billing. For aids where there were balance billing, this is important, we had to create a system that tracked the payment. You'd be amazed at the number of audiology clinics that have third-party reimbursement, send it off to billing and collection, and there's no system in place, either themselves or billing and collection, to be sure they received payment. We created a system where we tracked what it is the bill was, what it is we received at the time in which the hearing aid was dispensed, how much was due from the patient, which we got at the time the hearing aid was dispensed, and how much was due from the third-party reimburser, either it be UHC or Blue Cross Blue Shield. And we sent that off to the business office. And we allowed 3 months to receive payment, which is an arbitrary point. And then when we saw that it wasn't being paid after 3 months, we let billing and collection know what's going on with this payment. And it was taken care of. But you would be amazed the number of practices, and I know this to be true, who have third-party reimbursement get whatever payment they get from the patient at the time in which it's paid, if any at all, bill it to the third-party reimburser, and assume that the payment has been received. That is a death kill, because that practice has the cost of the aid as part of their budget, but they don't have a corresponding income. It's a double whammy. So for those of you who do third-party reimbursement, you really need to have in place a method to track payment. You don't assume that you've received the income just because you've billed it. And the other one, which I'm going to talk about in great detail next at the next presentation, is you really need to consider how you're going to integrate, quote unquote, OTC hearing aids in your clinic, and equally as important, remote fine tuning. And I'm going to talk about both of those, why you should do that and how you should do that in the next presentation. Okay. A little carrot out there.
Yeah, a little tease.
a little carrot. Okay. So soon I'm going to demonstrate this. I know you hear the drum roll about the Excel spreadsheet. And we're going to talk about how to take this stuff and incorporate it into a bundled and an unbundled model. So bundling, again, is all inclusive. Unbundled is pay as you go. How you have to make that decision. How much does it cost to operate your clinic? And how should you charge for your service? What do you do with that information? How and when would you promote bundling? How and when would you promote unbundling? We promote both, and we let the patient decide which way they want to go. How much is the cost per hour to break even? 0% profit. But you never want to do that, because you're never going to have costs that you never thought you're going to have. You always want to have money in the bank to cover these unexpected expenses. Plus, you want to have money for staff, equipment, and so on and so forth. You never have a cost that's equal to 0%, because that's just not a good strategy. So again, cost per hour is equal to the total of the direct and indirect costs minus the cost of goods divided by billable hours. That's the formula. It all seems straightforward, but it's not always easy to gather the information. So now I'm going to demonstrate how we did it. Don't worry about that one. So here's one you need to think about. What are your billable hours? That is, as billable hours decrease, cost to charge increases. Not as straightforward. So here's an example. Total contact hours per staff is 2,080, assuming 8 hours a day, a 40-hour work week, and 52 weeks. So the contact hours for all my staff was 18,720. That is 2,080 times 9 audiologists is 18,720 hours. So at the beginning of the year, July 1st, I had in the bucket 18,000 plus hours of time for staff to generate income, billable hours. Thankfully, audiologists don't see patients every minute, every day. Then, what is the estimate of billable hours? Or what are the number of contact hours? How much time do they actually generate income? That's where you have, that's the billable hours. And then how does this relate to the cost to break even? So consider non-contact hours. Now, this is important because audiologists don't think along this way. So in my environment, okay, this is my environment, there were 22 days of vacation day one. That's 8 hours times 9 staff. That's 1,584 hours per year non-billable. They're gone. Their expenses haven't stopped, but they're gone. There were 8 holidays at 8 hours, 9 audiologists. That's 576 hours. Every audiologist were allowed 5 CEUs times 8 hours times 9 audiologists. That's 360 hours. We had a thing called Ogura Day, which is a research day. It was mandatory to attend. That's 72 hours. Sick days, they're allowed 12 days per year times 8 hours times 9. That's 64 hours. Audiology grand rounds, 99 hours. Wednesday morning CEU, 216 hours. Retreat, 45 hours. So there were a total of 3,816 hours starting out where audiologists would not be available to see patients. So if you take the 18,720, you subtract the 3,816, that leaves you with 14,904 billable hours. That means before you even started the year, 20% of your time, there's nobody available to see patients. That's 1 day a week. Think about that.
Right.
That's 1 day a week.
Yeah.
Without anything else going on. Now it gets worse. Okay, watch this. Bereavement. We had one staff member out 1 year, 4 occasions, 2 days a week, 2 days. So that's 8 days. That's not in that first slide. We had maternity leave, 3 months. We had staff who were on surgery and recovery. We had one audiologist had jury duty where they were out for a week and another one was out for 3 days. Washington University is Christmas party heaven. There are so many parties around Christmas time that everybody's gone.
Yeah.
Here's one that's crucial. No shows. Or they're so late that you can't fill the slot. In 1 year, we had 645 no shows.
Yeah.
That would be between a half hour and 1 hour. We had 6,419 patients who came in late and we couldn't fill the slot. You really need to have a system to get a hold of this and a policy in place. That's a whole presentation in itself. How do you handle repeat no-shows and late cancellations? Because it's like your staff being on vacation. They're not generating income to no fault of their own.
I'm excited for the round 2 of our this presentation. You had mentioned earlier remote diagnostics and stuff like that, because without putting the cart before the horse, we don't need to get into it now. I just want to kind of put a pin in this, is that a lot of this is, like you said, you need to get a handle on it and figure out a policy and all that in terms to minimize this. But a lot of it also is, how do you very quickly rebudget your time effectively? And I think there's some really exciting opportunities starting to kind of emerge of ways you can be a lot more dynamic to do that.
Then I would love to do that, because I never really had I knew the policy on what do we do with repeat no shows and what we would do to cancellations. So I knew how to take a handle on that, but I did not have a handle on what do we do at that time in terms of generating income. So I would be actually interested in that, but I don't have an answer to that one. Okay.
We'll talk about that on the next round.
Okay. Travel within a facility to go to grand rounds. Town hall meeting. That is, the chair had 2 town hall meetings, which was 2 hours long, twice a year. Report writing, telephone calls, responding to emails, preparing for teaching. I mean, we had staff who taught PACs, who taught residents. There was time away from the clinic. Writing manuscripts. We had a hearing aid research lab. There was time set aside to write manuscripts, guidebooks, other counseling handouts. Calibration, which we had 3 big clinics. You can't use the equipment. The equipment is down. Normative data for new procedures. Research. I had 2 staff members directly involved with my hearing aid research lab. Public speaking in the community. Taking care of division tasks. Any number of things. So remember that 20% is at the start. All of these things are added on top of that. And on my spreadsheet, I'm going to share with you how some of these can affect your bottom line. And I'll show you that. So this is the spreadsheet that I developed years ago that would help me very accurately calculate the cost per hour and then convert it to charge per hour. And I just I sort of wanted to walk you through it to give you an idea what it's all about. This took several years to work through. And I also sent it to several business managers at Washington University to check for its accuracy, to make sure that it was doing what it was supposed to do. But let's kind of look at it as it is right now. Right now, you're seeing that here on top, because I have 9 audiologists, there are 18,720 billable hours that are available at the beginning of the year. That's our starting point. And remember, the formula is billable hours. That is, how much time is a person actually in the clinic to see patients. And earlier on, I shared with you that just taking our vacation, holiday, sick time, and those kinds of things, we ended up basically having 20% of the time in which each staff member was not available to bill. So it was reduced by that amount. So that's what this top line is. With 9 audiologists that you see down here, starting at the year, there are 18,720 hours available. These 3 lines here are all of my direct and indirect expenses that I just simply transferred over from my P&L that I shared with you earlier in the presentation. This line here, the 660, that is the separating out of all of my expenses relative to those things that I dispense. Because remember, billable hours or cost per hour is your total direct and indirect costs, which would be those 3 top lines, minus your hearing aid sales or invoices, which is that line, divided by the billable hours. And then the remainder of this are just other expenses for contractual adjustment. So my total expenses for this particular spreadsheet is a little over $2.9 million. So that's where I start. Okay. So I just simply entered the data from the P&L directly into these first several lines. You'll notice down here in the next section, this is going to calculate my billable hours. So at Washington University, every audiologist has 22 days vacation. And with 9 audiologists, that comes out to a little over 1,500 hours in which they're away from the clinic. We have 8 holidays. That's another 576 hours non-billable. We have 12 sick days. Again, you can read the numbers, 864. And there's something that we call unrecorded, which we won't worry about right now. Because we're a medical institution, research, and a lot of things going on in terms of new programs, we have meetings, and we have about 5 meetings per year. And that comes out to about 360 hours away from the clinic. And then there's something called personal days, which here is 2 days. So what started out at 18,720, subtracting all of this time that the staff is not there, it comes out we really have 15,084 hours available for the staff to see their patients. And if you take all of that, that comes to $195.40 per hour for cost. And that then is calculated a little further down in the spreadsheet. And it tells me if I want a 20% profit, that 194, I need to charge $235 an hour. Or if at the end of the year, I want $500,000 profit, that comes out to about $230 per hour. So this very, very accurately and very, very quickly tells me if I have a target of 20% and my cost is $195, what do I have to charge per hour? It's $234. If I'm a little more entrepreneurial and I say it should be a 50% profit, that would go up to $293. And so you can work any way you want. For me, I settled on 20%. It was arbitrary, and it worked because we were profitable all these years. And I wanted about $500,000 profit at the end of the year. So it came out roughly to $230 per hour. So what I want to share with you now is how easy all of this is to work with. Let's say I'm feeling like we had a really good year. And now I want to increase my staff to 10. I want to go up by 1 staff. I just take my number now and I increase that to 10. And look, you went now up to 20,800 because you have more billable hours, and your cost went down to 173. And your charge per hour went down to 208. And for $500,000, come down here a little bit, it went down to 203. But because I added staff, I now have an additional expense. And let's just say the person has a salary of $70,000. And let's just say the benefits are 30% of your salary. So we're going to add that onto this as a cost, which would make it $2 million. That'd be $91,000. $2,171,344. What happens? And now I'm going to take this now, make this into 10. So by just simply entering into the spreadsheet one additional staff member, correcting the billable hours up because you now have one person who's generating more hours, it's taken that original sum, which was 195, and now we're down to 181. So you could see that you could take this information to a hiring person and say, look, we can cover these costs. I went from 195 now down to 181. And then also your costs. Or I could just say, I'm going to keep my cost per hour the same and just make more money. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which you can jumble this. Let's say you're an institution, and instead of having 22 days vacation, which is a little over 4 weeks, you have 15 days. And let's say you have 6 holidays. And let's say you have 10 sick days. And let's say you don't have any meetings and you don't have any and it will instantaneously change and calculate your cost per hour, and then also calculate your charge per hour. So in the beginning, we were at 230. Now we're down to 200 because we made these changes. So this really, really allows me to make all kinds of instantaneous decisions by placing the information in whatever box I want, and then also trying to do future forecasting. What if my costs for all of my hearing aids, instead of being $660, I was a better negotiator, and this now went down to $600. What does that do? It tells you instantaneously. Well, let's say I had a really bad year and I had a lot of contractual adjustments, and instead of 804, I had 12,000. Let's just say, or whatever it might be. We'll make this 12,000. It tells you instantaneously what your cost per hour is going to be. So I just wanted to share with you what went into the spreadsheet and how you can manipulate it instantaneously by any set of data that you want, and how it will change your cost per hour and convert it to charge per hour, whether a percent or what your goal is at the end of the year relative to 200,000, 300,000, whatever it might be. So that is just a tool that I decided that I needed to take the time to develop so that I can very, very quickly predict what my performance is going to be if I made any change in my budget.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I think it's brilliant, Mike. I think it really gets to the guts of how to make these decisions from a financial standpoint and understand exactly what your break-even rate is and all the different costs that go into, being able to operate at these different percentages of profitability, like you outlined.
And it also makes it an excellent tool to take to your business manager, to your boss, whoever it might be, and you're just not throwing things in the air and hoping that it sticks. You have solid data to make solid financial decisions. And then when you do that over time, there's trust built into you because you can deliver what you promised.
Absolutely.
You have to remember that cost per hour is fluid, as I demonstrated. Your cost can increase, decrease based upon changes in salary and fringe benefits, collection rate, cost of goods, equipment, repair, support staff and services. Staff numbers could increase, decrease. Billable hours could increase, decrease. Goal of percent could increase, decrease. Goal net could change. But the point is, all of this is in that spreadsheet. And all you have to do is one click, change it. And you'll know exactly what is the change. This is just a cute little picture, knowing that not only is income important, but what can you do to control expense? It's a pendulum. And we have control over both of those. I want more income. I got to be a better negotiator for invoice cost of aids. You and I, we had a lot of discussion about this when we ordered stuff that we ordered.
Yeah.
All right. And then cost per hour is a reasonable profit. This is an example of how we took this into a bundled model, okay, based upon the data. So what you're going to see next is we established a dispensing fee for our bundled model for hearing aids that had 1 year or a 2 year or a 3 year warranty. And for this model, I assumed a $240 charge per hour that included the fitting process and 7 visits in the first year, 3 visits in years 2 and 3. That was my model. You could change it any way you want, but I just want to show this is what I base the information on. Okay. It's a template. It's a starting point, and you can change it any way you want. So what did it come out to look like? So on the top here, you'll see year 1. It's all of these numbers are based upon $240 an hour. I assume, because it's a 3-year warranty, that my cost is going to go up 5% to $252 on the second year and $265 on the third year. So for a 3-year warranty, a 2-year warranty, a 1-year warranty. Had to include an HAE, that's 1 hour, that's $240. Had to include our pre-HAF, that's measuring and being sure we got the right thing and the hearing aid is doing what it's supposed to do. That's $120. We had the hearing aid fit. I calculated an hour and a half, that's $360. There was the HAE, the patient came back, we counseled, we made any changes. I assumed 1 hour. Then we had 3 hearing aid checks, each of which were $120. If you added that up, the cost for that is $1,320. The second year is an additional $375 because we didn't have these additional expenses. That was in the first year, and we just had the 3 visits. The third year, again, only 3 visits, and that was an additional $405. So for a 1-year warranty, we took the $1,320. That was our dispensing bundled cost. And we added that to our cost for the hearing aids. And you can have a presentation on, do you want that cost to be your invoice cost? Do you want that to be the manufacturer single unit cost? I won't get into that, but that's just the cost of the aid. We always added the $20 shipping. A lot of audiologists forget there's a shipping attached to your cost. And then we provided goodies. And by goodies, I mean, we gave every patient a dehumidifier and some other things as part of their package. So all we did for a 1-year warranty, it was $1,320 added on to this. For a 2-year warranty, it was the $1,700, which was a $1,320 plus $375 added on to that. And for a 3-year warranty, it was the $2,100, which was now the $3,000, whatever it was, added on to that. So we just simply knew exactly what we wanted to charge for any hearing aid that had a 1-year, a 2-year, or a 3-year warranty utilizing a bundled approach. And that's how we did it, based upon charge per hour and time analysis of what we did in that first year, what we didn't do and did do in the second year and the third year. And we just simply added those charges, the professional component, if you will, to the cost of the hearing aid. And there are also, and then different type of visits, okay, for the bundled approach. And we used to counsel this on the unbundled approach. And again, in the year, we've been doing the unbundled approach for a little over 2 years, and the bundled approach, which we did for years. Again, surprisingly, one, the number of our patients who elected to go the traditional bundled approach was about 90%. Equally important, and this might surprise people, when we offered patients, and I'm going to tell you right now, our cost to the patient, and I'll go into much greater detail in the next presentation, these were really good hearing aids, entry-level hearing aids. For 2, with an unbundled approach, their cost going in was $810. That included REM and 2cc, and then a menu of things to do later on. Little visits, we gave them a menu of services. In the year and a half that I collected data on that, 93% still went for the bundled approach, the more traditional technology, and 7% opted for the unbundled OTC route. Okay. So that's why I said before, and I'll say it again, audiologists that I've talked to, that I've listened to on Facebook and the various, they seem to have an apocalyptic view of the future based upon the competition from OTC, DTC, and big box. I back when heard about, Congress's attempt to put OTC, I viewed that as an opportunity, not a threat. And I needed to develop a strategy to take advantage of that opportunity. And that's what the next presentation is all about. So I believe our future is bright, and that's the focus of the next presentation. And I'm done.
That's awesome, Mike.
One more slide. One more slide. Thank you for your time and interest. If you have any interest or you need clarification, feel free to contact me, and I promise you I will get back to you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really do think this is this is a topic that's come up a lot, which is, it's one thing to talk about sort of the state of the industry, the way things are moving, and kind of at like the theory level, but really to see this extremely granular approach and understand how somebody might get started. I just continue to believe that's so it's in such high demand right now. So I know that as somebody that's been in this field for a long time, a lot of people respect you, look up to you. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people reach out, because I think that you're imparting a lot of the wisdom that you gained by doing all of this and being profitable, like you said, for all those years. So can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing all that. It's been great.
Dave, thank you so much for the invitation, and I'll be with you next time for the next one.
For part 2. Sounds good.
For part
Stay
2.
tuned.
Have a good one.